Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So, for all of you students tuning in today, strap in because we're going to take a massive 10,000-year step back to look at the ultimate big picture. History classes can sometimes feel like this endless blizzard of dates and names to memorize, but today, we're zooming way out to map the entire American Odyssey. We designed this specifically to help you see the forest for the trees, tracing the journey of the United States from ancient indigenous lands all the way to a modern global superpower.
To make this epic timeline actually digestible, we're breaking it down into 5 key chapters. Think of this as the ultimate syllabus for your U.S. history class. We've got 1. Foundations and collisions, 2. Rebellion and a new nation, 3. Expansion and civil war, 4. Industry and global conflict, and finally, 5. Cold War to the present.
All right, let's dive into Chapter 1, Foundations and Collisions.
So let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Before 1492, North America was not just some empty wilderness. It was literally buzzing with diverse, incredibly complex civilizations. For instance, the Mississippians built Cahokia, this massive urban center that was actually larger than London was at the time. Crazy, right? Across the entire continent, groups like the Iroquois Confederacy developed intricate, highly organized political systems, alongside distinct cultures, vibrant languages, and really bustling economies. Then, 1492 happens, Christopher Columbus reaches the Americas, and boom, it kicks off this massive wave of global change. Pretty soon, you've got Spain, France, and Britain fiercely competing to establish colonies, and by the 1600s, the British have their 13 colonies firmly planted on the East Coast. But this whole era, stretching up to 1763, was really defined by intense and immediate conflicts between these newly arrived Europeans and the Native Americans who were already living there. Now, think about this setup. It creates a massive central tension. You've got 13 rapidly growing colonies, and they're basically operating under the heavy hand of a king who is an entire ocean away. So it really begs the question, how long could these colonists actually put up with British control and endless taxes before just snapping? Well, that brings us right to Chapter 2, Rebellion and a New Nation. Things escalate at lightning speed here. In 1765, the colonists start actively resisting British taxes. By 1773, that pushback explodes into blatant rebellion with the Boston Tea Party. Literally 3 years later, 1776, they take the ultimate leap and declare independence. And then, miraculously, by 1783, led by General George Washington, the Americans managed to actually win a grueling war against the most powerful empire on Earth. But here's the thing, winning the war was really only half the battle. They now had to build an entirely new government completely from scratch, and they used 2 foundational blueprints to do it. First, the U.S. Constitution, which created a strong but balanced federal government, and second, the Bill of Rights, which was added to guarantee basic, undeniable freedoms for its citizens. These 2 documents are essentially the blueprints of the country. Moving right along to Chapter 3, Expansion and Civil War. Okay, if there is one academic concept you definitely need for your notes in this era, it's this: manifest destiny. This was this incredibly powerful driving belief that the United States was literally destined to expand across the entire North American continent. And they did. The Louisiana Purchase effectively doubled the country's size overnight. But we have to remember the devastating human cost here. This aggressive westward expansion led directly to the tragic forced removal of Native Americans, most notably on the horrific Trail of Tears. Now, at the exact same time the country is expanding outward, internally, it's fracturing. A deepening, increasingly violent divide was forming between the North and the South. At the core of this conflict was the brutal institution of slavery and the intense debates over states' rights. By the 1850s, this tension was just pushing the country straight toward a breaking point. And in 1861, it broke. The American Civil War begins. After 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed, the war effectively ends in 1865, and President Abraham Lincoln takes the monumental step of abolishing slavery. The whole period that follows, stretching up to 1877, is known as the Reconstruction era. So what was Reconstruction? Well, it was this massive, incredibly complex undertaking with some truly staggering goals. First, formally end the hostilities of the Civil War. Second, physically and economically rebuild a completely devastated South. And third, and perhaps most vitally, integrate millions of formerly enslaved people into society as free, equal citizens. It was a monumental effort to heal and remake a fractured country.
All right, on to Chapter 4, Industry and Global Conflict.
It feels like almost overnight, America shifts from this mostly rural landscape into an absolute titan of industry. We see this unprecedented economic boom where millions of immigrants arrive from Europe and Asia seeking new opportunities and literally building the modern American infrastructure. Big cities completely explode in population, and giant corporations rise up to dominate the landscape. The modern economy is basically being born right here. But all that rapid growth led straight into a seriously turbulent 20th century. In 1914, the First World War era begins, which really pulls the U.S. onto the global stage. Then, the roaring success of the 1920s crashes brutally in 1929 with the Great Depression, causing just massive, widespread unemployment. Finally, the country mobilizes for World War II, which eventually ends in 1945. Now, right in the middle of that timeline, the country obviously had to survive that crushing economic collapse. And that brings us to another key term for you, the New Deal. Introduced by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, these were sweeping government programs designed specifically to combat the massive unemployment of the Great Depression. The country managed to pull itself out of the economic depths, and by the time World War II ended in 1945, the United States had completely cemented its status as an undisputed global superpower. Which brings us to our final chapter, Chapter 5, Cold War to the Present. We are now getting into the modern dynamics that directly shape the news you watch today. It's a time of intense duality, really. On the global stage, you have the Cold War, this high-stakes political and military chess match against the Soviet Union. But domestically, back at home, you have an equally vital fight going on, the civil rights movement. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. were fighting tirelessly against racial segregation, pushing the country to actually live up to those founding promises of equality. And amidst all this global tension and domestic struggle, the U.S. achieved something truly spectacular. In 1969, American astronauts landed on the moon. It was just a brilliant illustration of technological triumph and, obviously, a major symbolic victory during the Cold War space race. Bringing us right up to the present day, the landscape shifts violently yet again. In 1981, the Cold War ended, leaving the U.S. as the dominant global power. But the world changed abruptly with the September 11 attacks, which completely reshaped American foreign policy. Today, the modern United States is defined by incredible advances in technology, deep globalization, but also by stark political divisions. The history you are studying in class right now, it's still actively being written. So let's pull the whole shebang together. There are really 5 core themes that trace this incredible journey from indigenous lands to a modern global superpower. It's a story of relentless expansion, of deep and often tragic conflict, of world-changing innovation, and of ongoing, continuous struggles for equality and democracy. Which leaves us with one final thought. History isn't just something that happened in the past, right? It's a baton that it's passed to the next group of citizens. So knowing everything you now know about the foundations, the rebellions, the civil wars, and the innovations of the past, how is your generation going to step up to shape the ongoing struggles for equality and democracy in the future? Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, guys. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll see you next time.